We are here with Fenton Bailey, the writer of this amazing ScreenAge book, Fenton Bailey, forward by Graham Norton, and it's such a great, great intro.
It is really. After he agreed to write the intro, I was really touched that he said he would do it. And then I read the intro and I was like, oh my God, I wish he could write the whole book. It's like just like
Yeah, there's something. So I'm going to quote from the introduction that Graham Norton wrote to ScreenAge. And as Fenton Bailey, who we have here, said when collecting his GLAAD award in 1997, until we can embrace, that was 25 years ago, until we can embrace the zaniest, freakiest, and gayest among us, there can be no fairness. The hope is that one by one, this ScreenAge will embrace us all. So
he said it all, didn't he? Really, I didn't really need to write the book.
well, let me ask you, how long did it take you to write this book? And also, well, first I'll let you answer that question.
It really, I mean, actually, it was a sort of a pandemic baby. And so the actual sort of writing bit was only really about a year. And I was in quarantine a lot because we were traveling around. We were shooting in the UK, shooting Drag Race, and shooting Drag Race Down Under in New Zealand. So every time we went somewhere, had to spend 2 weeks in a hotel room, which was like the perfect cure for writer's block, or just, using everything else to distract you, because there were no distractions. You could not leave the hotel room. So that was the main thing. But then really, I suppose in a way, it's like for about a decade, I wrote a column for paper called Planet Pop. And so I was often writing these essays once a month about pop culture. And then a few years ago, oh my God, no, not a few years ago, like 10 years ago, we published a big sort of coffee table book of pictures of people at World of Wonder that we'd work with. And the publisher of that said, you need to have some words to go with this. So I'd sort of written some bits of it before.
Well, it very much, there's a quote from you that pop culture is queer culture. It is our workaround for a society that has wanted us to remain invisible, on the margins, out of sight. It is something of a Trojan horse and goes about its disruptive work undercover, disguised as entertainment. And I would say, after living and being in your book, wouldn't you say that all culture is queer culture?
I probably would. Like, yeah. Yes, and Randy and I, like, over the years, we kept on thinking, gosh, there's a lot of us in the entertainment business, and at some point we were like, well, hang on a second, the whole thing is queer, and the whole culture is queer, and actually the history of art, so many artists, even though they've been de-queered by the academic establishment. I mean, Warhol's a great example of that, of sort of trying to like desexualize him and present him, which I think he encouraged himself, present him as an asexual isolate, but that wasn't his truth. And so I think it's all been not covered up, and not only covered up and not only repressed, because in this way, like, I think the fear is if it was out in the open that culture is queer culture, gosh, what are the right-wing radical loonies going to do with that? So like, if once they know that they're just soaking in it, that you can't avoid it. So maybe that's why it's,
Well, it's funny because a friend of mine, a trans woman, she said her mother said to her, well, what will people think? And she said, if I thought other people would think, I would get down on my knees and kiss their feet, I would kiss their hems. And I think as queer people, we already know that other people don't think, that we already have gone to the fringes. I mean, for me, the whole creation of JT LeRoy was very much knowing that I was not having the language for what I felt, not having the words, the way to articulate it, being trying to fit myself into these boxes that told me that I wasn't okay.
Right. And I would venture to say, and feel free to disagree with that, JT LeRoy was a kind of drag creation, different
Yeah,
gendered,
yeah.
and also playful. And people respond as they did to playfulness, I think, to that, because if you took everything so deadly seriously, you probably wouldn't have done it. You know what I mean? There's a tweaking, there's a twinkle
Right,
in
right.
what you're doing. I remember, I wasn't the only one, obviously, because JT LeRoy took off, and we were huge fans. And I remember I think I wrote you an email. Somehow I got your email address, and you sent me
The
back a
books.
raccoon penis bone. And I was like, oh my God, this is so exciting. I still have mine.
Oh my God, you got
So
to show
the
me.
Sharpie that you signed it with is slightly sort of faded, but you know, oh my gosh, what an amazing thing. And I know I don't want to make light of it because I know you suffered terribly, but what an amazing thing.
Well, for me, it was so important. Not, it wasn't. It was a gender variant person, and again, we didn't have that word. It
Right.
was everything that I couldn't express in my body, and it. I hate when people, oh, it was this tragic, or it was misery lit, and no, it wasn't. Read Sarah. It definitely wasn't. It was definitely when JT was out there, there was that twinkle. People weren't there gathering because they felt sorry. Because when do you ever buy a book because you feel sorry for someone? Or
You're right, it was exciting. It was like, yeah, it was exciting in all sorts of ways.
yeah, it was a lie agreed upon. I mean, it was very clear the person was whatever, and it really was one of the first times where it really didn't matter. It
Mm-hmm.
was built upon, it wasn't Emperor's New Clothes, it was built upon the work and the need in our culture to have gender variance come into the forefront, that it did not matter, that someone can use any pronoun they choose and still look any way they choose. And we
Mm.
just didn't have the language yet for it.
No, no, that's so true. And I'm still sort of surprised, especially in this moment now, with this sort of like it's Pride Month just started, and it seems like there's a war on pride that just haven't seen the intensity of it before. So I'm still baffled why it is that people just can't live and let live. Like why, and especially with this sort of drag is grooming and sexual predator. It's such a nonsense. And it's surprising to me that here we are in 2023.
Yeah, but how many times have we said that? I mean, that's the
I
same
know.
lie that it's you. We saw that with Anita Bryant, that uh gay men, it was gay men, and my friend Danny Nicoletta did. We went to the opening of the Harvey Milk terminal in San Francisco, and to see those photos, not just of Harvey Milk, but of the campaigns. And
Right.
it's the lies that the LGBTQ plus community are here to sexualize your children. And what frightens me is if the attempt to drive the wedge to separate the TQ from the LGB, because that's like the 70s when there's that line from Gentleman's Agreement where this woman is identified as Jewish, and she's like, but I'm not the kike kind. I remember feeling complimented as a kid in the 70s, not just in the 70s, but when someone say you don't look Jewish, and they'd say I mean that as a compliment, and I would take it as a compliment.
Mm-hmm.
So that GOP using it, I mean, how do you see our way out of it? Because so much of the work you've created has been so important to allow people to see, to love characters. Like, it was important to me that people loved JT LeRoy, because if you could love this gender variant, mischievous, fucked up human being and his mother, then perhaps there was a way that I could sneak in and get some of that love too, because I certainly didn't feel it for myself.
Wow. Well, yeah, I mean, you could not, I think most people could not but love that character. It was impossible to not love.
Oh, not love, right?
It was impossible.
Yeah.
And
Which is
but
wild.
yeah, but also I think maybe the mistake that I keep on making is to think that there's some sort of linear progress. And maybe it's not about linear, maybe it's just a like I think you were saying, like it's just you fight the same battle over and over, but in different terms, in different language, in different ways. Maybe that's what it's about, rather than trying to think, we really move forwards.
But maybe we do. I mean, if you, I've heard the argument that I mean, they will not. They could, no, they could repeal gay marriage.
Good.
But I seriously doubt, because it's now so much money once capital is invested,
That's right.
you know?
Yeah. But look what they did about abortion, though. I mean,
Yeah, it was definitely a mistake not saying the word abortion. I mean, if it was like, if abortion was a money making, I wonder what, well, first of all, because I think it's so important to understand history, and you do document so much. And from the Eyes of Tammy Faye winning the Oscar at that seminal, oh, I don't, really sad uh Oscar ceremony. And I love the way you encapsulate what it was. What was it like to, were you there, or you
no, no. Do you think we were invited? Absolutely not. No. It's like, but actually, that also it was good because it was so weird. I really could not think how to end the book. And even when that thing happened, it wasn't until a few days later I was like, oh, maybe there's something here. And like,
let's talk about what it was. So,
right. Well, so years ago, Rennie and I made a documentary, The Eyes of Tammy Faye, in 2000. So, like, over 20 years ago. And it was, documentaries were a much smaller deal then. And it did well. It went to Sundance, and Lionsgate released it. And it did pretty well at the box office. Small potatoes. And then about 10 years ago, Jessica Chastain came to us and said, I want to make a documentary. I mean, I want to make a movie about Tammy Faye, and I want to license your documentary. And we said to her, well, that's great, but like, in truth, you don't need our documentary to make a film about Tammy Faye. Why do you want The Eyes of Tammy Faye? And she said, look, I love the way you told the story, and I love the point of view of the story, that Tammy Faye was not a joke, that Tammy Faye was this radical sort of, I guess, a priest of love, that it wasn't her Christian televangelism, it was her fundamental love of people, and understanding that TV was a great way to reach people and to touch people. And so we were like, okay, great. And it took her 10 years to make the film. And honestly, I think we all wondered, like Randy and I wondered, and I think Jessica did too, if she could play Tammy, because we didn't actually immediately get see it, but she was so good. And then when she won for Best Actress. How incredible that was. And then, or I should say before that, Best Hair and Makeup won. And yes, absolutely, they're Jessica's awards and all power to her. At the same time, I think they were like awards for Tammy Faye, a way for the movie business, which is, let's face it, very snobbish and elitist, a way for them to recognize Tammy Faye. Because Tammy Faye was always a small screen person. She was always a TV person. And she was always looked down on as a not trash TV person, but kind of. And so the sort of halo effect of getting that Oscar, I think, was really significant, especially that year, because of course this was a year that Will Smith got up on stage and really punched Chris Rock. I mean, it was an extraordinary thing. And after that happened, I was watching at home, and after that happened, no one was paying any attention to what happened after that. But I felt Jessica made this speech that was so, it was like, I ain't gonna get, no, it was getting a little teary. It was so channeling everything that Tammy said and believed in, and was kind of just what you needed to hear. So it was a sort of, it ended up being this magical thing. Because what are the odds? A, that film would even win anything, and B, that she would win it that night right after that thing had happened. You know, it was like, on the one hand, we had all the male toxicity of the last decade under Trump and that nasty right-wing macho bullshit and sort of divisiveness and hate and violence. That was on the Will Smith side. Not that he's a Trump fan, but, you know. And then on the other hand, you had Tammy Faye, honestly, the outsider winner that year. Just, you know, just amazing, really. And I was very, very glad not to be there, in the sense that I think you get the best view on TV. And Randy and I, we're not that starstruck, you know, like, I don't know what am I going to say to, you know, all these stars, you know, I don't know. I'd sooner be at home and just go to bed.